Good morning and welcome to the National Newspaper Publishers Association's Let It Be Known. Well, as we discussed on yesterday's program, some Republicans are angry with House Speaker Kevin McCarthy over the debt ceiling deal he made with President Biden. At least talking about removing McCarthy as Speaker. And remember, he won the speakership by the narrowest of margins and after 15 rounds of voting. So very tenuous situation. They voted yesterday to move it out of caucus, a very narrow vote, 7-6. And so we'll see as it heads to the House floor. We'll discuss that this morning. Also, the Supreme Court is preparing to rule on everything from President Biden's student debt forgiveness to affirmative action. And a new poll suggests that a majority of Americans don't want the high court to touch affirmative action. We will discuss that as well. Also, too many Americans are using more than 30% of their income on housing costs, something that financial advisors and others are really concerned about, particularly as we talk debt ceiling. We will take a look at that. In my exclusive telephone interview with Vice President Kamala Harris, who had a lot to say about small businesses, Black women's maternal health, and the debt ceiling crisis, her role in that deal that we saw reached the other day. Let It Be Known starts right now as Power 96 says the champ is here. Good morning to you all. So as criticism builds and Republican ranks over the debt ceiling deal struck by McCarthy and Biden, some hardline conservatives have begun floating the idea of toppling the speaker. Remember, he got the speakership narrowly and after 15 rounds. On a House Freedom Caucus call, Representative Ken Buck of Colorado floated using the motion to vacate the rule that would only allow any member of Congress to force a vote to remove the speaker. And remember, that was the compromise McCarthy made to become speaker. He agreed to this particular rule that will allow just any member of Congress to say, let's remove him, and then a vote would have to take place. According to Representative Buck, he was speaking, of course, toward the end of that call. He referred to it as the, quote, elephant in the room. After House Freedom Caucus Chairman Scott Perry of Pennsylvania suggested it might be too early for such a drastic threat, Representative Paul Gosar of Arizona proposed using the threat to force McCarthy to allow members to amend the bill on the House floor under an open rule that could stall the bill's passage. And remember, June 5th is the extended deadline because originally Secretary Janet Yellen said it was going to be June 1st. Now, Perry responded to that request that they would discuss the issue more when members, all the members returned to Washington after the long holiday weekend. One lawmaker on the call who confirmed that Buck suggested using the motion to vacate said of the Biden-McCarthy deal, quote, some people feel this is a complete miss. He says, I'd say there are 5 or more who would be sympathetic to Buck's position. Another lawmaker on the call who said he didn't hear Buck's suggestion put it bluntly. He said the unity we had is gone. Nearly a dozen House Freedom Caucus members slammed the debt ceiling bill in a press conference yesterday and vowed to vote no. But when asked how many of their members would support a motion to vacate, only Representative Dan Bishop of North Carolina raised his hand. Asked if he was worried about Bishop threatening a motion to oust him, McCarthy, he replied, no, that's his choice. And we know that it's all coming from the right wing, the MAGA wing of the Republican Party, who are calling the deal, they're using terms like insanity and this is only other people's language, a turd sandwich, and criticizing the scale of the cuts. They are really upset with McCarthy, and McCarthy is now seeking some cover. David Youngblood said Biden spanked the Republicans like old school, and that apparently is the case, or it's also could be that they just didn't kill all these social services, programs that they really wanted to. Let's face it, the GOP has been very, very out in front. They want to gut food stamps. They want to gut Social Security. They want to gut all of these programs for veterans and others. And that did not happen in this bill. Again, we're going to talk more about that later, and with our conversation with the vice president coming up later on in this show this morning. Affirmative action. Let's move over there to the Supreme Court, because most U.S. adults believe that colleges should be allowed to consider race as part of their admissions process. However, an Associated Press NORC Center for Public Research poll indicated that only some people think race should play a significant role in the final decision. These findings are critical because, of course, this is the month starting tomorrow, June, where the Supreme Court will start issuing all of these rulings that's going to really shake up everything. The poll, which surveyed a diverse range of participants, demonstrated that 63% of respondents believe the Supreme Court should not prohibit colleges from considering race or ethnicity during admissions. Remarkably, the poll found that this sentiment was not significantly divided along political or racial lines, indicating broad consensus on the issue. Respondents supported considering race in admissions. They place greater importance on factors such as grades and standardized test scores. I hate testing. I hate those SATs and all that stuff. But 68% of adults stated that race and ethnicity should not be a significant factor in college admissions decisions. This preference for academic merit over racial consideration was consistent across different demographic groups. The poll results suggest that Americans support affirmative action as a policy, even if its future remains uncertain. So much that the court is going to be doing, but it appears ready to rule first on this, which includes lawsuits that challenge the admission systems of Harvard University and the University of North Carolina. With a conservative majority on the court, of course, many college leaders are bracing for a decision that could potentially limit or eliminate the use of race in admissions. David says people refuse to acknowledge affirmative action is a remedy for previous affirmative action that was set aside exclusively for white makes or white people, right? Males. Okay, he clarified that. And Power 96 says, let's keep it real. White women and Asians benefit the most from affirmative action. He says he doesn't care if caring and an Asian person loses their job. He said, I said what I said. I kind of paraphrased it, right? Power 96. We can't be going all crazy on folks like that. Let's going all taking the sledgehammer to them like that. But this poll is interesting. Again, they claim to have gotten a wide demographic of folks, and the Supreme Court is just about to rule. They're going to rule also on the student loan forgiveness plan, which also within that bipartisan debt ceiling bill, it restarts the payments that have been paused since the pandemic. So a lot's at stake this month as the Supreme Court. Remember this time last year was it when the session ended in June, Roe v. Wade was overturned, and it sent folks into protest mode, and we'll likely see a lot more of that at the Supreme Court later in June, as everyone braces for these what's sure to be very controversial decisions. And speaking of the debt ceiling, folks, as we head toward a June 5th, January 5th, June 5th deadline, Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen has said that's the deadline that the U.S. will default on its debt. If Congress can't get this debt ceiling bill that Biden and McCarthy agreed upon, they can't get it passed, everything will blow up. And so we go to housing costs. And a recent study conducted by Chamber of Commerce, which is a product research company specializing in real estate, revealed that more than 25% of U.S. homeowners are burdened by housing costs, spending over 30% of their income on their homes. And remember, financial advisors, financial gurus, uh, all say that 30% is the absolute limit that you should spend in household costs from your income. This study utilized data from the U.S. Census Bureau, analyzing monthly housing costs and median household income in the 170 most populated cities nationwide. The findings indicate that 27.4% of all U.S. homeowners are considered cost burdened. Miami, Los Angeles, and New York City are leading the list of cities with a significant number of financially strained homeowners, where more than 4 in 10, 40%, feel stretched beyond their means due to housing expenses. And we know with interest rates soaring, the cost for a mortgage has increased exponentially even in the last 6 months. And of course, rents are sky high. What's that saying? The guy, rent too. He said, "What is it? Rent is too damn high." David Youngblood on the front on affirmative action is calling, and I'm thinking about Bernie Mac. Excuse me. Not good. One second. This is where we need a commercial break. We'll get it together, won't we? All right. As the host melts down totally. But David is saying he's calling BS about affirmative action. He says it's just that BS. We've allowed them to co-opt the language to make us in our ability to participate at all the I'm not getting it. He says keep pointing out that all affirmative action prior to 48 was for them and every benefit was for their exclusion use. Removing affirmative action as a remedy cements in place the white man's historical advantage. And David says, slow down. Was I going too fast, David? That's what's going on here. That's a total meltdown here this morning. Total. This is unacceptable. Got Dr. Nicole says, are you okay? Like, where's my help? Where is my help this morning? We're going to get to our exclusive interview with Kamala Harris, the Vice President, shortly. I promise you that. So David said exclusive. Exclusive. Did I say exclusive wrong? Good chance I did. But anyway, housing costs. You can't spend so much money on housing costs. I guess Power 96 says you better call Tyrone. Tyrone don't have the answer, unfortunately. But nonetheless, help is on the way. Someone help me out here. And for instance, the District of Columbia, 26.3% of homeowners also have this problem. So these major cities with the high rents are really pricing folks out, have been for a long time. Not just so we've had the problem of gentrification, moving people out. Before that, redlining, and I guess it goes back to what David is trying to say here, or has said. I shouldn't say trying to say, but the historical advantage that he mentions. He says we must not allow affirmative action to be co-opted by them and called discrimination against white folks. And that, folks, is what's going on at the Supreme Court. Is what the Supreme Court is going to be determining. This is an ongoing situation, an ongoing crisis, and we will see what they rule. This is of interest, and we'll see. But I think David has hit the nail on the head here. It is exactly what they're trying to do. They're calling it discrimination against white folks. And it was in fact, it was white folks who brought these lawsuits that now have wound up in the Supreme Court. So this is America, folks. Let's not forget that this is America, and this is what's going on today with affirmative action, what they call affirmative action, and we will see. We will see. Now, folks, we are now that we are a little bit more recovered, and I got Dr. Nicole worried about me over there. She's not too far from me, by the way, which is a good thing. As I await some water here, as I slowly die right here live. This is like I know people watch like this is great TV. He could die right now, and nobody will bring him water. I'm trying to slow down. Some water. Somebody want to bring me some water? Good Lord. Here comes some water. Is it, folks? I'm about to die on a live here, and I can't get water. There we go. Dr. Nicole says she's not that close. Oh boy, that kind of tastes like scotch right now. The Vice President of the United States sat down with me yesterday. She, of course, was an integral part of the negotiations, and as integral as anyone else in helping to reach a bipartisan deal so America could avoid defaulting on its debt obligations. In 2+ years in office, the nation's first Black and woman vice president has already carved an indelible mark on many impactful policies that have seen significant increases in small and minority-owned businesses and record low Black unemployment. The vice president has spearheaded programs like women's maternal rights, helping to retain autonomy over their bodies. In fact, as she spoke, about 33 states and the District of Columbia agreed to something she had put forward, in which women would get an additional 12 months of postpartum care after they give birth. Many have wanted just 2 or no additional care, but the vice president pushed for that. She also talked about um, one of the biggest goals during that debt ceiling negotiation was to avoid, and this is a quote from the vice president. She says one of the most important aspects of where we are in our goal, it was to avoid the kinds of losses that the Republicans had initially proposed, and she called it very significant that they were able to do so. If you recall, this deal that the Congress is now debating puts caps on spending for the next 2 years. It takes back $28 billion in unspent COVID relief funds and strips $20 billion of funds earmarked for the Internal Revenue Service. And remember, the president had slotted $80 billion for the IRS to help curtail tax cheaters, but the GOP sought to protect wealthy taxpayers who primarily seek loopholes to avoid paying federal taxes. The debt ceiling agreement restarts federal student loans, as we mentioned. The payments will start again once this is passed, or unless otherwise. It also, in reaching the deal, it adds some new requirements for recipients of SNAP and the temporary assistance for needy families benefits. Work requirements are now in place. New work requirements would now be in place. Veterans and the unhoused are exempt from such requirements. And what the vice president said in our conversation, she says that we've been able to maintain that we needed to do to what we needed to do to preserve Social Security, Medicare, and veterans benefits. And we can stop right there for a moment, folks, because this is what they wanted to cut, and what the MAGA wing of the Republican Party wants to do away with in its entirety. And this is their own words: Social Security, Medicare, and even some veterans' benefits. Imagine that. They send these folks off to war and they don't want to give them any benefits. As a result, the vice president said they actually, in this deal, there are increases in those in Social Security, Medicare, and veterans benefits. He also made it a point to say that the administration created 12.7 million jobs, including 800,000 manufacturing jobs in their 2 years in office. He says a lot of these issues were what we were fighting to preserve in this debt ceiling deal. For example, and I'm quoting the vice president now in our conversation, she says, if they required new work requirements, we would preserve many exceptions to the requirements. For example, she said, that any requirements for veterans and those who are housing insecure were non-starters. And she emphasized housing insecure. She says veterans and housing insecure people, not just homeless, would be exempt. She says we were not willing to compromise. And she went on to uh, explain housing's insecure. Folks who are earning perhaps what many would consider a decent paycheck, but still can't afford homes or a place to live. They are in they're being bounced around. So even those are protected. The debt ceiling crisis, of course, and the subsequent deal reminded voters of, she says, of the significance of choosing candidates who have their constituents' best interest. She says so many of the issues have to do with who is in elected office. She says it comes down to the power of the people to elect representatives who reflect their values. When the majority of people on legislative bodies understand that you shouldn't create policies on the backs of poor people, that's policy that most respect our values. She pledged that the Biden Harris administration would keep pushing forward, stand up, and speak up about the needs of working people and families whom she said have been on the outside of politicians' priority lists for too long. She says we have to keep them on the inside of the priority lists. In our 20-minute conversation, the vice president declared small businesses one of her passions. She described growing up with her mother and the woman she called a second mother. Miss Shelton is her name. She says Miss Shelton lived 2 doors down and ran a nursery school above her childhood home. She helped show her the importance of small businesses. She says Miss Shelton was a small business owner, matriarch to the community. She was a community leader, a civic leader who mentored people in the community. I was raised with an understanding of the importance of small businesses. They aren't just business owners. They are civic leaders, community leaders, and are so much a part of the community's cultural fabric. When I was in the U.S. Senate, I was able to work with my colleagues to get an extra $12 billion put into community banks, which are banks that are in the community who understand the community and its needs and who will create access to capital, often where the big banks don't give access to capital for our startups, young entrepreneurs, and small businesses. Vice President Harris described a round table meeting or a summit she convened with young Black entrepreneurs in the tech, science, and space industries. And she described absolutely being blown away by the talent, by uh, the aggressiveness, and the want to learn more by these young entrepreneurs. The vice president said she was very impressed, and that's what she likes to see. And that's the type of legislation that this administration continues to push to make it um, more convenient, more easy for these young Black entrepreneurs to get the funding that they need to get the access to capital and other things that they need. The vice president also spoke passionately about women's maternal health. She said specifically Listen, Black women in particular, she says, more than 3 times likely to lose their baby or lose their lives during childbirth. And she says that is unacceptable. And she says the one reason for that is because of bias. It's simple, it's plain and simple. She was very forthright with that. It's because of bias. And she championed the work of doulas, which um, she called very important individuals, mostly young Black. My oldest daughter is a doula, a proud doula in Nevada, and she talked about how she really pushes doulas, and she believes that doulas can really help educate the medical community and eliminate a lot of the biases that we see. David Youngblood says, that's why I say that Biden spanked them. He tricked them into believing that because he negotiated, they won. Nothing could be further from the truth. That $10 billion in IRS cuts is distributed across the other programs that were cut. And that's interesting. Actually, that's very interesting because it is earmarked for other. It's going to be earmarked for other programs, David. And you're absolutely right. And David Youngblood says, now that we've put the debt ceiling off the table, we can now fight for the priorities the American people support. And this is, it's like talking to the vice president. Listen to David. This is what that part is what she really honed in on. So she, Michelle Madison's writing about do, but the vice president is very much resolved in, of course, her work and continue to push the issue of women's maternal health, small businesses, and of course, protecting the social safety net programs that exist. And listen, Social Security is something that folks worked for most of their lives. Why would they want to cut that in any way? In fact, they should look at increases. According to many financial people, it should be increases. Look, inflation and other things happened. That money that they put away, that they every week out of your paycheck or whenever you get paid, you see Social Security coming out of that. Where is it going? Which bank is it going to? And why isn't it earning you the interest that you deserve? These are the things that the vice president discussed. Very compelling discussion with her. You can read about it at blackpressusa.com, the Washington Informer, the San Diego Voice and Viewpoint, Dallas Weekly, and other newspapers, IU Beat, other newspapers around the country. Our interview with the vice president. Thank you so much for joining us this morning. I got some water. I survived barely. Oh, I saw the light. I don't know that it was a train or it was the light, but I saw a light. But I made it. I got water. We'll see you tomorrow.